Hello, everybody. Welcome back for episode 36 of the Ready Set Shag podcast. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. It is a beautiful Monday night here in Utah. And as usual, we are back here talking to some people that we look up to, people that we want to know more about. That's what this show is all about. If you're listening to on another platform at another time, welcome and thank you for joining. Tonight, my guest is no exception to the rule. Obviously, I'd like to have people on who are interesting and who I respect. And I like to think this man is very wise, much wiser than myself. That's why I used to talk to him on a regular basis. We've kind of fallen off a little bit, but this is hopefully a chance for us to reacquaint a little more and then maybe make some plans. And for you guys to learn a little bit more about him. So tonight, I'm joined by Aldous on the farm, just off of Orwell Lane. What is going on, dude?
Not much, man. I anxiously await this wise man that will be joining us this evening. I can't wait to talk to him. He sounds like a pretty cool dude.
He should be here any minute.
Excellent, excellent. Well, in the meantime, maybe we can just chat about whatever tickles our fancy, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, first, like the name. Tell everyone, like, how did you come up with the name? Because it's a moniker. You know, you don't use your real name, obviously.
No, I don't. But I opened my window one day, and I went looked out, and I saw the paper was there on the doorstep. So I went out and sipped my coffee and picked up the newspaper and read the headline. And I don't know what it was. I can't tell you the exact headline. I can tell you that this is actually how it happened. But yeah, it's just I looked down at the newspaper and I realized I was living in the modern dystopia that I had read about all through my formative years.
Mhm.
And then that was kind of ingrained within my head. It's like, my God, I'm not just reading about it anymore. I'm actually seeing it on a daily basis. And so when I went to create a handle for, doing social media and everything in this wonderful contemporary time, I was like, well, it's got to be something that hits that point home. And Huxley, Aldous Huxley, and George Orwell are obviously my two favorites. And I live in the country, and I grew up on a farm, and animal farms always held a special place. And so I thought the triple reference was as good as it's gonna get, and went ahead and tied it all together with a bow.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. Like, does anyone ever tell you you have like a great radio voice? Anyone ever tells
I do, I do get that a lot. Yes.
it's and for anyone who's watching, who's listening after the fact and not seeing this live on YouTube, all this does not reveal his face. He keeps pretty private, obviously his name and also his face. So you're not missing anything. You don't get to see this handsome man, but and actually neither have I. I've never seen him. But yeah, so but it's I've always thought it, and as you're describing everything, I'm like, man, this guy needs to be like reading stuff on the radio or something, because like it's perfect. Like the bass, the treble, and all the midtones, they're perfect. So
Yeah, that's
um
I was told for a long time, for gosh, 3.5 years now. I've joined Jeremy Ice and Fire on a Saturday YouTube show discussing comics, pop culture. We get into a couple of shows pretty deep. We get into From and Shogun, and then obviously based off his handle, you can guess he's a really big Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon fan.
yeah.
And I've been really blessed to help him on his channel's journey through success. When we first started, he was like at 600 subs. He's now, I think, almost at 20,000. So
Damn.
it's just really taken off over there. It's been a great experience. But that was my first foray really into doing anything. And then we kind of dabbled and did a couple things. And
Yeah.
as things go, shows come, shows go, people's schedules change. And the whole time we were doing the show, I had Jeremy in my ear along with one of the other co-hosts telling me, man, you should really just do a show. You always want to talk about this stuff. And so I did a couple one-offs with some guys on my channel and a couple other channels, trying to feel what works. And it
Mhm.
takes time to kind of figure out what your format is and everything. But last year, I kind of figured out what I wanted to do in at least some rough form, and I started doing the gutter on Friday nights at 11:30. It's just a 1 hour show, ideally a 1 hour show. We go over occasionally,
Mhm.
But sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't. It used to just be me. I've pulled a friend of mine on as a co-host, so we have a little bit of self banter going on. But that's where it stems from, is because I had so many people saying, you got some good thoughts, and I certainly nobody seems to be upset listening to me. So it goes back to that. You got a good radio voice. Well, if everybody's telling me, then I might as well use it for something. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always respected your voice, not just the tones in your voice, but also your takes on things. I think they're a little bit different than a lot of the stuff that you hear uh, from a lot of the big, we'll say, influencers in the culture sphere, the entertainment sphere. So when our mutual friend introduced us, I was like, oh man, this is great because this is not like you and I don't line up on everything, and you like things that I don't like, and vice versa. We got into some discussions surrounding the new Star Wars stuff and all that. And it was, and like those are the discussions I really like. And because we, I think the only reason ultimately that probably that show didn't work out was one, the show we didn't work out was one, you weren't interested in that stuff, in like even giving it time of day, right? Like I'm not gonna sit down and watch something like what was on at the time.
I think it was Obi-Wan,
Yeah,
actually,
it was
which
Obi-Wan.
was which was funny. In retrospect, it's hilarious because I told you before Obi-Wan, I'm like, this is not going to be good. There's nothing good about it. But I'm like, I've got this weird sixth sense feeling. My spidey senses are tingling that just based on this little 15-second promo, Andor is going to be something different.
Yeah.
And sure as shit, it was. And it's a shame because, man, I would have talked the hell about Andor. I still will. That show was fun. And did it have its flaws? Absolutely.
Right.
There's not too much out there today that has flaws. They're really looking back. There's most of the things that we love had a lot of flaws. It's just with that lens of nostalgia, we tend to forget and ignore. But there's good stuff out there, and I think that's at the heart of what my positions are on most things is I'm not going to waste my time on something that I know probably isn't going to hold me. I'll give everything a shot. I'll give
Mhm.
everything a fair shake. Well, not everything. There's some stuff that I just have no interest in. But if it's something that's in that vein and somebody I respect says, "Oh, dude, you got to check this out," I'll give it a shot. I gave Fallout, and dude, I bounced out 3 times, but I finished episode 1. It's just not for me.
I was actually going to ask you about Fallout because that was one of the ones I'm like, I don't know how much you play video games or how familiar you are with the franchise, but like, I guess as a show, were you able to get through any of it?
An episode, but like I said, it took me 3 times. I noped out twice before I finally finished it. And I'm sure it's great, man. I never played the game, so I have no cultural reference for it.
Mhm.
To me, it's just like anything else that's dropped out there, and I didn't think it was that great.
Can I ask maybe what specifically made you bounce out the first two times before you finally like, okay, I'm going to sit through this and just stomach it?
It seemed the acting, number one, whether that's intentional and of world, or it's just how they chose to frame it out. It didn't really sit well with me. The
Mhm.
dialogue felt really forced, and then just the atmosphere. It just didn't jive. And again, man, I have no experience with the background material. This just didn't resonate. I had the exact same thing happen with a product or a not a product. Well, it is kind of a product, but with a series that I am familiar with, which man, I read the first 5 Wheel of Time books.
Oh, yeah.
And man, I watched episode 1 and I noped out, and I had 2 great friends of mine that are huge Wheel of Time fans. They read them all. Like, man,
Yeah.
that takes commitment because you can only read him describing a woman folding her arms underneath their breasts like so many times in
I
so
know.
many books before you just go, my God, man, there are other positions for a woman to stand in and look down upon somebody.
And
And
there's 16 books or something,
yeah,
I
so
think.
I think I made it to book 5. I think it was book 5. Book 5, maybe I started book 6.
Mm,
But I watched an episode of that and I'm like, man, this is awful. This is just
yeah.
absolute dog shit. And they're like, no, no, you got to give it a chance. You got to give it a chance. I'm like, fine, fine, I'll give it a chance. So I watched 2 more episodes, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell you guys are on, but I want it
Yeah.
because this is terrible.
There
And
it's
so,
funny.
and I
Oh,
was
good.
familiar with that. So
Mm,
I don't know. And I can tell you the same things that one, it's the same thing that Fallout did for me. It didn't resonate with me. I didn't associate with anything that was going on. It felt like I was watching something that I had no interest in. Or that wasn't trying to captivate me at all. Like, I had to have interest in it in order for it to carry me. It
yeah.
wasn't like a carrier wave that's gonna pick me up and boost my interest. It's just gonna go, "We're making the assumption you're here to watch this product, and we're going to show you this product and nothing else. We're not gonna captivate you in any way."
Well, it's interesting because I asked because, and it's good. I'm kind of glad that you've never played the games, because something I was talking about today was I'd be interested to know what someone thinks of this show that's never played the games and is not familiar with how the Fallout series goes or any lore or anything like that. And because I do think it's important that a show, it needs to grab everyone, right? Like, the point of a good television show is that it should pay homage to what it's based on, if it is that, right? It should reflect what's in the source material, but you also need to find a way to not just member berry people to death and just be, oh yeah, look at, remember this. And I think some people who were not familiar with Fallout were okay with how it began, and I think there's others like yourself who are like, I don't get it, I don't quite get the world, because I think you're totally right that the dialogue is at times like campy and it seems forced. That is intentional, at least I believe that. And like the show and even the games, like they kind of blend between this like very serious tones and then sort of these like light-hearted, again campy, sort of like joking, almost satire tropes. And
Right.
but I think you either get it because you've played the games and you understand the dialogue, or you're just like, oh, like these, like Maximus, the Brotherhood of Steel guy. Either the whole time I watched the whole series, and the whole time I just thought, this guy just kind of sucks, like as an actor. And it's taking away, because I liked Lucy. I think if you watch her throughout the series, you would see good like character development. And then Walton Goggins did a great job as the ghoul. And he only played a really small part in the first episode, so that kind of sucks, because he's the easily the best part of that show.
Right. Well, and maybe there's always a chance for revisiting it.
Yeah.
I'm often surprised sometimes how when you go back and watch something, it catches you in a different frame of mind or a different moment, and you're
Sure.
able to engage with it a little bit more. there's there's I'm not saying it's bad, but I would say this is that I think one of the things that modern entertainment, and when I say modern entertainment, most things in the last like 5 to 7 years that have come out, instead of being and trying to captivate a wide audience, everything's looking to get a small hardcore group of fans.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, maybe that's the best way, because we're in a weird space right now.
Mm.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, we had this thing called peak television. And we were in a world where you had Sopranos on HBO, you had The Wire on HBO. Shortly thereafter, in the early 2000s, you had the rise of AMC with Mad Men and Hell on
Yep.
Wheels and Breaking Bad. And then we seemed to have a little bit of a dearth, and then we had this explosion. Really, in Netflix with House of Cards was kind of the first one I remember, and then Game of Thrones was the next one. And since then, we've never had anything that's of that cultural epoch water cooler show like Game of Thrones. But things are so fractured now that you get moments, right? So people talked about certain scenes in Daredevil when Daredevil was on Netflix, and people talked about certain things in The Expanse when The Expanse was on.
Yep.
But you don't get that massive resonance. Why that is, I don't know, but it seems to be everybody's trying to capture smaller markets that are more focused. And whether that's a result of the streaming wars or that's just a result of where our culture is, I think it's a little bit more exemplifying of our culture in that I don't think we have a cohesive I don't think there's a whole lot that's cohesive anymore, and I think that's
Yeah.
to our detriment.
Yeah. No, well, it's so many things. You could speculate that like because of this, it's this, and I don't, and because I do think a lot of it deals in social media and how these ideas are passed around. Like in the days of The Sopranos, 6 Feet Under, and that like big HBO boom, The Wire, like the the internet didn't exist the way it does now. So people enjoyed shows, and it was, like you said, a water cooler like culture where people at work were like, "Oh my god, did you see what happened last night? Like this week was amazing." Like it was what brought us together. And these shows now, as the streaming wars, kind of started, everyone's vying, you're vying for everyone's attention. But then they started dumping entire series into our laps at one time. There was nothing to wait for. So, and I think one of the big first series that I feel did that was Stranger Things. And Stranger Things was really good. There was a bit of a lull, I feel like, and that show came out and we were like, whoa, like this is great. Like Goonies, like kind of meets this like X-Files, like it's such a cool concept with like little kids, and it, like, I don't know how much you like that show, but it was one of my favorites at the time. But it was all dumped at once, and then everyone was like, "Oh, this can work. Everyone can get this at one single time." And maybe there's other shows that did that, but that was like one of the first that I remember. But we're so used to that now. It all gets dumped at once, and then there's no reason to gather in the living room every week. There's no reason to gather. And when you do that, right? When you have a show where it's released week after week, it's got to be good, right? You got to keep butts in seats. It's kind of like how music went from my whole album has to be stunning to sell multiple copies, to like, oh, I just need one or two songs to be good. I can sell those on Apple, iTunes, or whatever and be good. That's kind of like where we are with streaming now. Is like, well, we just need one banger at least to kind of keep people there. And that should be episode 1, and then maybe episode 8, and then 10. Because that way it just keeps people going, and then it's going to keep them in their seats. I don't know, man. It's a weird. I don't know if you followed me there, but that's how I think of it in my head when I think of where entertainment has gone and what streaming has done to it.
Yeah, there definitely is something about that, and that's something that's come up very frequently on our Saturday show is the episodic release versus just the dump all at once. Part of that is the binge model, right? The
Hmm.
the binge model is really heavily pushed by some streaming services over others. HBO does the episodic thing still. It's one after the other, to both their benefit and their detriment. One that I think if they would have dropped, say, The Last of Us as a full show, I definitely would have watched more than what I watched. What I watched was I watched episode 1 and then I watched half of episode 2 and noped out because I'm like, where that first 20 minutes of episode 1 was so captivating. It was so good. And then they lost all of that energy that was done in that first 20 minutes in the end of episode 1 and then episode 2. It just ground to a halt. And it's like, I'm out, man. I want where was that? You set me up for something amazing. And then it diluted into something that was totally different. With Stranger Things I find so incredibly interesting because the Duffer Brothers, that was born entirely out of their pitch for It. They pitched for It, they didn't get It, but they went, "Man, we've got this," and they started throwing nostalgia, all the things they loved about the '80s, they put it into the '80s, and they're like, "Man, how can we hit the zeitgeist?" And they hit the nail on the head, and then it was a huge success, and of course,
Yeah.
they immediately get greenlit for a season 2, and you get season 2 isn't as good as season 1, and then boom, we gotta do season 3. Season 3 is even more watered down, and you're like, "Man, they lost the magic." And then COVID happens, and we get
Right.
the lockdown. And then they come back with season 4 it's got energy again. And it's like I finally clicked. I'm like, "Oh my god, it's these guys just needed time." They
Yeah.
needed time to develop it because they spent all this time. It's like The Matrix, right? The Matrix had the same thing. The Wachowskis spent a decade on that first movie, on honing that script to perfection, and getting that edge sharp, making sure everything worked. And then it's a huge, massive success, and the studio comes and goes, "Oh, we're going to do a sequel." So they threw something together. Well, it doesn't have that decade of honing to that razor edge. So what you get is a little bit dull. And then by the time you get to 3, it's a hammer. It's not even a knife anymore. It's so dull. And it's just a
Yeah.
blunt instrument you're throwing out there. And I think that's the biggest thing here is you either need to come in with everything prepped. If you're going to do a 5-season show, have everything arced out and everything prepared. J. Michael Straczynski showed this with Babylon 5. He had a plan and he built trap doors throughout it so that characters could leave and he was able to swap them out and it didn't matter. He was able to tell his story. And I think a lot of people just kind of throw the Play-Doh at the wall, hoping it sticks today.
Yep.
And if it sticks, great, we get a season 2, but they have no plan. Or if they do have a plan, it's so poorly conceived that they have an extraordinarily difficult time wrapping that into something that even resembles that initial proposal. And I think that's why we see so many shows petering out. That's why we see so many shows, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, nor do I. My theory is on a lot of these that, like, oh man, the first season was pretty good. Why didn't they give them a second season? Well, maybe the executives went to them and they've been doing this long enough and went, hey, what do you have planned for a second season? And they saw what they had planned and went, yeah, we're not putting any more money into this. So I think there's a lot of factors there, just like you said. I think with, why are shows this way? Why are they seem to be focusing on smaller markets? Well, I think the same things. There's so much going on and everybody's paranoid, especially right now because numbers are going down. Money's not there. You see that with everything that Amazon's been canceling. God, they dumped a ton of money into the periphery. And that was a borderline success. It was okay, but they greenlit it and then canceled it within like 2 months. They said, "Oh, season 2," and then boom, everybody's fired. We're done, and an executive's out, and they're paying people $20 million to sit in a chair, not doing anything. That's how much it matters.
I
So
was
it's a strange world for sure. And that's not even getting into, since I said strange world, that's not even getting into what's going on with Star Trek. I have no idea why they continue to throw money into that burning pile. Um, and I think that brings up an even more interesting question is between like Amazon's Lord of the Rings, Amazon's, like we mentioned, Wheel of Time, what Paramount's doing with Star Trek, what Disney is doing with Star Wars. There seems to be no respect, or not really. Respect's the wrong word. When you have something that is a guaranteed moneymaker, like when Ford had the number one selling car with the Taurus, they didn't go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to strip it down to its wheelbase and completely redesign it. No, it's selling good. Just keep on producing that car. Like, just all we have to do is keep producing that car and it's going to sell. Toyota doesn't do that with the Camry. Honda doesn't do that with the Accord. We're going to sell this thing. Aesthetic differences, new body design. We took the CD player out. Now you got a nav system, power seats. Great. New features. But overall, it's the same car. Why? Because it's selling well. For whatever reason, when you get into entertainment, they think that you've got to rebuild the wheel every single time. And it goes beyond. I mean, the first knee-jerk reaction everybody's going to have is, oh, wokeism, or oh, politics. But this has been going on long before that. I mean, if you go back into, the 90s and the 80s with some of the reboots that they were trying to do in the 60s and the 70s, it was the same thing. They're trying to rebuild to fit whatever their current, not necessarily even philosophy, it's what they think the market research people want. And it never works. And
Yeah, I was gonna
why they're
say well, one of the things that I noticed was like, well, X-Files was one of those shows that like totally bit the dust from like that was before a lot of this DEI stuff, and a lot of it was internal struggles, I believe, between Duchovny and Anderson. But like even still, like it's like these studios, they don't really know what makes everything work. They try and reinvent the wheel, like, and they don't know when to end things. Like sometimes it's the end of the road for a show, like I'm like glad that there's such a thing as a limited series, because like while I wish I knew where a certain story might go, I'm kind of glad sometimes that shows don't go farther than they do. Like sure you could like 6 Feet Under is one of those shows I always, there's 6 seasons. It may have gone one season too long, but like that was it. But they could have gone. You could have gone 12 seasons with that show. because it's about people dying in a family run business. You could have just passed the torch, but they ended it because that's I mean that's also the show too, right? It's about dying and the end. So
Right.
like bravo to them for realizing, this is where we go, and but yeah, and you said something earlier that I just want to touch on real fast. Is like we are stuck too with these rose colored glasses of the past, that every show like between like 1970 and 2005 is like amazing and has no sort of like, they're all really great, there was nothing wrong with them, and then from 2005 forward or something, that all of a sudden DEI and wokeism started like plaguing everything, and it's like, well, no, there was a lot of shitty stuff before then. I don't know. I don't know if it's because we can't admit it, but I think Mrs. Doubtfire was a movie I was watching recently, and I was like, damn, like this movie is borderline inappropriate, but also like there's aspects of it that I feel like if it came out today, people would be like, whoa, what's all this crap trying to indoctrinate children? Bleh.
Right. Well, and
So
there is always that knee jerk, and the knee jerk happens from both sides.
yeah,
And that directly goes back to what you were talking about social media. And then I'll amplify that a little bit because of social media, you now have people that are literal talking heads, and they're no different than Siskel and Ebert, right?
yeah,
The difference is Siskel and Ebert were always viewed as being impartial,
mhm,
and now you have people that are clearly not impartial. They're very partial to one side or the other, and this comes into the general polarization and bifurcation of our society
yeah,
with the lack of cohesion. And that there's people on all sides are responsible for this. It's not something that happened overnight. It's not something that's a recent occurrence. It's always been the case. But with social media, and honestly, I personally, I think I agree with Jordan Peterson. I think a lot of it has to do with anonymity, and which is ironic. I understand coming from a guy that won't show his face online. But I do think that. Now, that being said, do I think there should be any kind of rules or restrictions that are placed where you have to use your name? Absolutely not, man. I'm a pure laissez-faire guy when it comes to anything. There should be zero restrictions.
yeah,
But I think that does play into it. And especially when you have people that are able to profit off of fanning the flames and building resentment, and then using that time and time again to great success. Do I think that that's a great business model? Absolutely, man. More power to you. Go out and make your money however you can get it. But to say that that's not at least some level why we're seeing some of what we're seeing, I think is at least being dishonest with
yes.
yourself, for where we are headed, and if not where we are at.
So
But
what's
you
the
brought up,
antidote to that? Can I just
yeah,
add, like, what would you like? I mean, you're a much different thinker than a lot of people that I talk to a lot of times. What's the antidote to that? Like when people are sitting down and watching a movie, especially now, because like, right, because the only way to get from where we are now to like a better like headspace about Hollywood or about movies in general or entertainment, how do we approach getting to a place that it's not so bifurcated?
I don't know if we can. I think we are. I think you're past a point of no return as far as when we look back, right? I mean, when I was a kid, Germany was separated by a wall. And man, when I was 6, I had to duck and cover under my desk for a nuclear drill. Didn't have to do it after that because they stopped doing them, but I had to do it once, and I vividly remember it. I also remember when Germany was separated. I remember when the wall came down. It was a different world then, and then we went through about 15 to 20 years where arguably I don't think the world knew. I think everything was kind of reevaluating where it was at. And then we went through a huge technological schism. The internet became what the internet is. Um, I would break it down that you had the internet age from about 2000 until about 2007, and I use 2007 because that's when the quote unquote smartphone debuts, essentially with the iPhone.
Mhm.
And I'm a guy that I used to travel heavy all around the world, and that's where I started seeing a change. This is all purely just my own reference, right? I have no studies to back this up or anything. But you used to be in an airport pre-smartphone, and you'd sit down at a bar waiting for your plane, and you'd have a beer and you'd shoot the shit with the guy next to you. Or there'd be a game on, and you'd watch the ball game with the guy next to you, and hey, he's having a really good year. Yeah, man, look, his arm really recovered from Tommy John or whatever, and you just shoot the shit. Just be, two dudes sitting in an airport that are both there because you don't want to be there. You're just trying to get home or get to your destination. Now you don't see that. Now it's everybody's looking at their phone. Everybody's more isolated. We have more methods of communicating with each other than ever before, and we are more isolated than ever before to the people that are around us. How many people know their neighbors? How many people can name 7 people on their block? There's a great Twilight Zone that kind of deals with that same concept, and it's the Monsters of Maple Street. And it's
Mm,
the lights go out and all the families come out into the street and they all start blaming each other. They're all the spy.
yeah.
Well, we're well past that point. I mean, we're at the point where you just assume everybody's the spy because you don't know anybody.
Hmm.
And then everybody that's a little bit different than you is immediately the more higher suspect. That's always been our nature, as shown by that Twilight Zone episode that was done in the 60s.
Yep.
But I think it's just been amplified, and I don't think there's a way back. I, now, can we resolve things a little bit better? Yeah, but at the same time, I'm going to take it back even further and say, when was the last time you can actually say anybody that you know of, like not in a theater, but just sat down and watched a full movie without taking a break? Because one of the things that I've seen is, man, our attention span is so short now
Mm,
that most people can't even just sit down and watch a movie. You got to pause it 15 times. You can't watch just a 1 hour show. You've got to do this, that, and the other thing. And,
mm,
you've got to have your smartphone in your hand while you're doing. I see this at the theater when I went and saw Dune. There was a dude in front of this is this epic movie, man. It's on IMAX. There's a dude in front of me scrolling on his phone in the middle of the film. It's like, you can't put your phone down for 2 hours. That's where we're at.
yeah.
And
It's
I,
a
I I don't think with that level of distraction, if you're that addicted to impulse and that addicted to that serotonin uptake, that you need to constantly check things, that's not something you fix, man. That only gets worse.
maybe it's a maybe it's the next like logical like step in survival of the fittest, like maybe these people, maybe that's just like what we're seeing is that these people are ODing on their endorphins, right? Like I need that hit, I need one more, just one more, because I need to feel good, I need to check my notifications. Did I get it, um and those people will essentially lose out in the game of life because they can't pull themselves away. They don't know their neighbors. If anything ever did happen, they're lost. They don't know, they can't rely on people. They immediately lock themselves in. They don't have the skills to um possibly survive. Maybe that's just, we just got to let it happen. It's sad to see, but that's our modern day like Darwinism in some way is, it's they're not going to make it, and it's sad. Because I see it too, and I can be guilty of it from time to time. But the one thing I've, since my kids are now getting just a little bit older, being outside, and we're about to go on a week long camping trip in our RV, and be outside, disconnect, no video games, no TV, just outdoors, campfires. And kids nowadays, that old adage, but like it's true. You're see so many kids just wanting to plug in, and I want to be famous playing video games, and I want, it's kind of sad that no one just wants to raise their family. I just want to be the best person possible to pass on knowledge to the next. It's just everyone's got to have their say.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm right there with you. There's nothing more heartbreaking than like taking my kids to the playground and you see all the parents just sitting around the periphery on their phones, not
Oh
engaging
yeah,
with their kids.
yeah.
It's it, we live in a world where everything is absenteeism, even if you're present, and there's something incredibly scary about that. Now, there is a benefit to that for those of us that see that because man, that opens the doors to some great ideas for writing. And what I'm seeing is we've got whether it's the even some mainstream publishers are putting out some good stuff, but you've got some really great indie guys that are really, gripping the hold of these wonderful ideas and really putting stuff out there. And there's been a little bit of a renaissance because of the very things that we're talking about, this interconnectivity, right? Even though there are negatives to it, one of the positives is right now, man, if you've got a little bit of a following and people respect what you say, man, by all means, put your thoughts down on paper and put something out, put a product out so that people can buy it.
Yeah.
You have that power now. You're your own marketing machine. You can reach more people across the world with your thoughts than ever before. And that is just truly magical. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate the power that they have if they put a little bit of energy into that, what they can accomplish.
That is for sure, and that's the balance, right? You got to strike the balance between spending too much time like plugged in and on social media, but also recognizing, well, this is a great tool because I'm a creative person. I want to write a story. I want to draw a comic book. I want to make a movie, a short movie, whatever it is. You have the power now to do all of that. Like even your cell phone, like you could argue that your cell phone, you could, if you're good enough at editing, you could shoot a movie on your cell phone, edit it together and have something just as good, if not better, than we had in the 90s. Like I mean, maybe even the 2000s. Like it's like that's where we're at with technology. Everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket, but most of us don't know how to balance the power we actually hold, and instead, or as you said, it's absenteeism. We're present but we're not. We're at the park with our kids, sitting there on your phone. Pay attention to what your kids are doing. They're probably calling out your name. One thing I've been doing, I haven't been able to drive the past 3 months due to health issues. um I've been walking everywhere. Like kids want to go to the park, get on your bike, get on your scooter. We're gonna go down. We'll just walk there because we live close enough. And why walk, or sorry, why drive when we can get fresh air and walk? Like it's
Hell yeah.
little stuff like that just to teach your kids like, oh, I don't have to get in a car. I can get some fresh air, see what's going on. Teach them, look both ways before going across the street. Stay into the left hand side. Away from traffic and stuff like that. It's all these little moments that are, they're not plugged into something. They're not having their face in a tablet, and they're such good learning moments. And people just dismiss them as like, oh well, I mean, it's just no. That's how kids learn. They learn from the experience of it, the minutia, and that's what I want to see more people do. Sorry, that kind of strayed from the whole like doing stuff with your phone, like
No, I think that's
creating.
great because it hits on a theme that I try to get to a lot, and that's when you're walking somewhere instead of driving, and it works as well when you're driving, but not as well with kids, in my experience. Because when you're driving, you still have association going on. You still know that, oh, dad always turns at this tree. When
Yep.
I at this tree, dad turns, and then we turn at the ice cream shop, and then we're at the park.
Yeah.
And they associate those things, but when you walk, it's a different feeling because you're taking yourself there. So the imprinted memory implants itself a little bit different. So instead of stopping at that tree and turning, you can stop at that tree and go, okay, good. This is a red maple. And it's called a red crimson maple because it's leaves. It's a maple tree. Pluck a leaf, show them it's a maple tree, but the leaves are red. Look how cool they are. All the other trees are green. This one's red, and then you can have a little moment. And now they're always going to say, well, now it's not a tree. Now it's the crimson maple because we had the tactile response of touching the leaf and looking at it in that moment with dad. And then when you're walking, you can hear a bird. Say you hear a woodpecker, you can talk about that's a woodpecker. They're always going to associate that sound with that moment. And when they hear that, they'll think back. So you're building layered memory and building auditory, tactile, visual, and auditory memory all at the same time. It has been shown multiple times that it implants deeper and it becomes something that's more able to be recalled. So that's incredible that you're doing that. And that's great. That's something that I try to do with my kids because your yard is your castle, right? And that's where they spend most of their time. And then
Yep.
where do your kids spend the rest of their time? They're transported in the car from one place to another. Break out of that habit and show them the world. The world doesn't have to be fly down to Florida. The world can just be, hey man, we're gonna go on a hike and we're gonna go
Yeah.
through the woods and we're gonna talk about what we see and what everybody needs to find 5 bugs, and talk about the bugs and Shit like that matters so much, and I think it's lost because you can sit your kid in front of a screen and have them watch a YouTube video about the bugs in your state, but it doesn't have the same impact as if they're out and actually seeing them.
I saw this. I don't know if it's true. It seems pretty damn true to me. But I see it everywhere. And it was, by the time your kids are 12, you'll have spent 75% of your time with them. And by the time they're 18, you'll have spent 90% of the time with them on average. And it brought me to tears because my kids are growing up quick. My oldest is going to turn 7 in June, and then my youngest is 5. But I mean, that all happened in the blink of an eye, and I'm already halfway to 12. And I think, wow, like this is it's incredible how much time, because it makes sense, like I don't think those numbers are far off. I mean, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, I mean, I'm out doing sports. I'm out all day at school. Parents are working all day. And then I'm at sports until 7, 8 o'clock, get home, eat dinner, go to bed, homework. But there's not a whole lot of interaction after that. Sure, I'm sleeping there, then waking up. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot happening, and that was the other thing that helped me realize, like, my time walking from my home, from our house to the park, and all those things, or even to the grocery store, because the grocery store is within walking distance. Like that's time that I'm like savoring with my kids, and the things that they probably won't really ever forget. Oh, we walked to the store with dad. Like it was fun, or we rode my bike, and you know, it's just, and like you said, oh, we heard a woodpecker, or oh, I saw some worms because it just rained and there's a bunch of worms crossing the road. Like it's just incredible how short of a time we really have with our family, and how absent a lot of families are from their kids. And then when they finally realize that they have time, they're out of time. Or you know what I mean? Like by the time they realize, like, oh man, I don't have much time. It's like, well, you're out now. They want to go hang out with their friends. You're not cool anymore. All that stuff.
Right, and I
But
think that I think that builds to a lonely resentment that I
yeah.
think you can see in the undercurrent of a lot of what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And that lonely resentment then is exploited, um, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because there's a massive sense of belonging to something greater than yourself that exists across the full spectrum of humanity. And with where we are currently at, with our lack of interconnectedness to our, whether you want to use the word community, I would just say yourself, because I think a lot of people have lost their selves online. They have no grounding principle. And so
Sure.
then when you're exposed to something that you agree with, you go with it, full sinker, because man, it's something that gives you a grasp. Anything that has a tenant or a structure tends to be that way. And I think that's what you're seeing across a wide spectrum of, at least what I see online, what are the behavior patterns that I see online, because I'm fascinated by human behavior. And man, there's no place that's a better example of it than Twitter if you want to see complete irrationality on a daily basis.
Well, have you seen, like, something that I just noticed was how, and this is sad because there's a lot of people that I look up to, or maybe not look up to, a lot of people I will listen to on advice, and even like super professional people. They're not like YouTube reactionaries, but like some of them too. Um, they're lonely. They don't have families, and they're not like young. These are people who are my age. They're mid to late 30s, early 40s. And even some that are older that don't, again, I'm not just talking about YouTube personalities. I'm talking about famous people. They're either divorced or never had a family, never had kids, but they're talking about this stuff as if they're some kind of expert on it. And I'm like, the saddest part of all of this is that, like, the real heroes that we can look up to are not these influencers online or the people that are talking about it. Like, we need to be like really looking at our neighbors. Like, those are the people who are likely involved with their families every single day, who are working hard in in uh in thankless ways, that aren't, grifting online for the next thing, right? And like, oh, I need money, I need money. Like, I'll do this for this, and like, and it's like, that's not the guy I need to follow. I need to take myself out of this and watch what's going on in my community, connect with the people all around me, because those are the people who are truly making the cultural difference. I've thought about that quite a bit. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I think, I say something on the regular to the point that I think a lot of the people that uh, tune into the show and follow me on a regular basis are probably tired of hearing. But I laugh when people talk about we're fighting the culture war. If you want to fight the culture war didn't start yesterday, and it's
Hmm.
not going to end tomorrow. It's generational. It's been going on for a lot longer than everybody that's listening to this has been alive.
Right.
Goes back arguably to one of my favorite decades in the 30s. I can tie it almost directly to some of the anarchist movements that were going on then and how they tried to change the country. If you want to truly fight the culture war, get out a piece of paper, write down your 5, 10, 15 core tenant values, go out and find a woman that agrees with the vast majority of them, get married and have a ton of kids and inspire those children with those motivating factors, that is their absolute moral foundation, and inspire them to follow that pattern. And if you do that enough, you outbreed the problem, and that's
Yeah.
how you win. You don't win it by typing on a keyboard in your basement. You don't win it by producing a book. You don't win it by producing a comic book. You win by making sure the ideals that are important to you are carried on to the next generation and then a generation after that in a manner that they are captivating and that they build with successive generations. It's the same concept with generational wealth. Everybody wants to be wealthy, but everybody wants the quick fix. But the easiest way to build wealth for a family is just 3 generations taking out a life insurance policy of $1 million on yourself. Take out $1 million life insurance policy on yourself. Take out $1 million life insurance policy on your kid. Make sure your budget accounts for it and pay it. Make sure it's a whole life policy that grows over the course. When you die, guess what? Everybody dies. There's $1 million. 3 generations, boom, you've got a nice nest egg and your family's not worried about anything anymore. But that takes extreme discipline to do. That takes personal accountability and responsibility. And for whatever reason, these are all really scary terms that people try to avoid. It's always somebody else's problem. It's always the fault of somebody else. I'm being scammed by the system. I can't get ahead. Well, getting ahead sucks and the world sucks. And it's never been easy for anybody. But every generation, people find a way. So be one of the people that find a way.
Well, so that I agree with all that. I think you're 100% right. And it kind of makes me mad that I stopped at 2 kids, but I that's what I could handle and what I wanted to do.
But even
Same thing.
replacement's better than nothing.
Right.
You know,
Um,
I'm at 2 myself as well, and, we wanted more, it wasn't in the cards for us, so it is what it is, but you deal with the cards you're dealt, you
right.
dance with the girl that you went with. You don't change mid-song, and you gotta go with what you got.
So so the next thing I would say is like you're 100% right. I think outbreeding the problem is based. Totally makes sense. So what about when people start talking about, or you had said, rather, let me just go back one more step. You had said like you're not going to change the culture by writing a comic book or making a movie or whatever, blah 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 blah. And I still agree with that too. So what about when people start talking about uh the slippery slope of like woke culture and DEI, all that ESG stuff in modern media? Does that affect culture at all, or is it still just a solution of that doesn't matter because I'm still outbreeding them and my core tenets and values will ultimately blow that out of the water?
Well,
What do you think about that?
I'm a firm believer in the market, number 1, and if anything has been shown, it's that DEI and the wokeism it doesn't sell.
Right.
And so by the very nature that it doesn't sell to the market shows you that it's not gonna succeed. Now they can continue to produce it, because their pockets are deep and they can take losses. But eventually, I mean, you've seen that happen now with a couple of investment firms and a couple of massive media companies. The media companies are gobbling each other up because they're looking for pennies. It's no longer about even nickels. It's about pennies, is how tight the margins are.
Mhm.
So they're doing anything they can. They're leveraging massive amounts of debt to try to get anything they can out there. And what you're seeing, take a movie like Prey that came out on Hulu, the newest Predator film a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That, for the most part, like 97% of that film is fun. It's engaging. It's a Predator film. It's an action film. They threw something in at the end, and it's just that little bit of wokeism. And man, that's what everybody complained about. And if you
Yeah.
watch, I read it somewhere at the time that like people were shutting it off before it even got there, so they weren't even watching the full movie. Well, they know where you're shutting it off. So if people aren't watching it, that's costing them money because people aren't engaging with their product. So yeah, all these things factor into it. And you make this is at the end of the day, we all make the choice of the media that we consume.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy with what you're consuming, that's your fault to continue to consume that.
Well,
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, that's period, end of statement. And that's where, if you've got guys like Brandon Sanderson's a great example, right? Like,
Mhm.
he stepped away from the publishing industry completely because he didn't like what was going on, because he's got his own ethics and morals, and he went, I don't like this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it myself. The dude's making millions every time he drops anything on a crowd fund.
Great.
Um, God bless him, man. Keep on doing it. That's fantastic. You've got guys out there that are doing the same thing with comic books that have stepped away from the mainstream because they're not happy. You've got, and in the same token, you've got smaller publishers that are arguably mainstream that have recognized that, and you get fantastic stories like The Last Ronin out of IDW.
Oh yeah, love that.
IDW is a smoking ruin of a comic book company, but they had the rights to Turtles. They got Eastman and Laird. They pulled that out, and man, that story emerged, and it was a huge hit. And it's probably the best Turtles book to be done in the last 25 years. So there's definite, you can point to 1,000 signs of positives, or you can point to 1,000 signs of negatives. And it just depends on what your philosophy is. Do you want to focus on the positives and what's being built, or do you want to focus on the negatives and just wallow in, oh, look at all of this? It
Well,
just,
it kind of comes back to what you were saying, that like people can ultimately make the buck that they want, right? Like if you want to make money being the negative Nancy of the group, then by all means do your thing. Um personally, I'm kind of, I mean, personally I'm at the point where uh I'm exhausted from it. I feel like there's so many good things that people aren't talking about because there's this idea that it's not profitable to talk about things that you like, and that sucks because like I like hearing what people are stoked on. Like what do you really like? Like what is your favorite indie comic right now? What's the indie comic that you cannot miss? Where is the artwork dope? Where is the storytelling dope? Like I'm sick of like bickering bullshit drama. Like tell me good stories. I don't give a fuck about the negative ones. I give a crap about the good ones. And
right.
it's like and that's incumbent on creators to like do that thing. That's why I really really like your show. Like you and I did 12 Angry Men. Like I could talk about that movie all day long. Love
Yes.
that movie. I love how it's shot. I love how it was made. Like it's just beautiful. Like there's nothing bad about it in my opinion. And there's plenty of movies. I just started watching Kill Bill Volume 1 today. That movie, like seriously, like I'm watching that movie trying to find something bad about it because that was like peak Tarantino in my opinion. Like that guy could do no wrong at that point in his career. Um, but like you know what I mean? Like, and that's like I want people to feel the passion dripping off of my words, right? You can't miss this. This is so good. Oh my God, I don't want to miss that because Shag just told me that I should go watch this. I don't want to miss that comic because Aldous said that this was the best artwork he's ever seen, coupled with some of the best storytelling he's ever seen, which was consequently like The Last Ronin is one of the best like package deals as far as story and artwork goes. I think the only other one besides that I liked in the same way was Descender. Um, but yeah, other than that, like I haven't found anything that really in very recent years has had both of them in the same way.
Right. Well,
So
I can give you two right off the top of my head.
yeah,
Mac Smith, Scurry, which is it's a great story about it's animals and it's really fun. There's violence because it's animals, it's mice.
yeah,
And there's hawks and there's cats and there's wolves and there's dogs and it's scary at times, but it's like like a PG-13 Secret of Nim kind of book.
this is a comic.
336 yeah, 30
Okay,
graphic novel, 336 pages for $15 right now on Amazon. Can't beat the
what?
price point. The art is absolutely killer. Max Smith Scurry. Another one, this one came out man, I think 2016 to 2019. And this is more space epic. It's almost like I would say akin to like an old epic poem in its reach and its scope, and that was Rick Remender and Jerome Opana's Seven to Eternity. Absolutely phenomenal art. Actually, I can pull a panel up because I was just talking about this with a friend not too long ago, actually last night. But while I'm doing that, but yeah, those two books, there's so much out there that's good that it's almost upsetting that people would focus on the negative.
Right?
It is just absolutely amazing how much good stuff there is. The difference is, comparative to all times in the past, it is getting harder and harder to find the good stuff, because there is so much shit, and that frustrates people. And it's completely understandable, but there's a lot of great stuff out there. Now, and this is that splash
Oh
page.
my god, dude.
This is from the end of the first issue of Seven to Eternity, and there is no way my screen can do this absolute justice, but it gives you a complete idea of the scope that this thing is operating in.
Wow.
And the artwork is absolutely brilliant. It honestly, it's shocking to me that this came out in the West, or at least here in the States. This is the kind of thing that you would normally see in like a bande dessinée, which is a European graphic novel, primarily coming out of like France or Belgium. It's just absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. The writing is poetry at times in where it's going and some of the themes that are explored. It got a lot of attention when it first came out, and it really has just kind of dwindled, and it doesn't get the acclaim that it should. Now, granted, it's 4 or 5 years old, but a book like this to me is evergreen. This is one that everybody should have on their shelf, and it goes back to that, like, it's got that scope and that thing that's just inspirational. And you look at this, and man, you could think of all the stories of where they're taking that, and that's what good stories do. That's what Jules Verne did for me when I first opened up 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Mhm.
And that's what I try to do on the gutter. Like you said, it's we talk about things that are inspiring. And yes, at times we will cover something and be negative Nancy's on it and just rip it to shreds. But we do it for fun and we don't do it all the time. The focus of the show is to talk about the things that inspire our guests or a great book that, man, this might have come out 50 years ago, but you got to check it out because it's absolutely amazing. When you're talking about things like that, Howard Chaykin, who is a massive leftist, extreme leftoid, his art is absolutely beautiful. And one of the most amazing things that he ever did was he got together with another guy that did an adaptation of Alfred Bester's The Star's My Destination, and it is stunningly beautiful. It's like the standard book when I talk to an artist friend and they're like, I'm really kind of searching for something unique. It's like, dude, check this out. And they're always blown away because I mean, Chaykin's entire career is he experiments with layouts and structure of storytelling. But when you get to that, it's something levels above anything. And it's sadly, it wasn't received well, because it's a lot of just illustrated pages with text kind of pasted around them. And the market that it was pushed towards didn't resonate with it. And now since then, there's this little niche fan group of us that are like, oh my God, this is like the next greatest thing ever. And we talk it up and it's hard to get. But that being said, it's still worth checking out. And then with the magic of the internet is now there's pirate copies floating around because all it takes is one person to get something these days in a nice high resolution scanner, and then everybody can have access to it, which is fortunately what has happened with another beautiful, beautiful adaptation. There was a series of 6 or 7 issues where Jim Steranko, one of my own personal favorite comic artists, did an adaptation of the 1981 Sean Connery film Outland, and he did it across 6 or 7 issues of Heavy Metal. It's the only time it's ever been published in English because the rights are in right hell because one production studio owns this and another studio owns that, and it's never going to be printed in English other than these magazines. Well, you can't find the magazines. And then it got even harder in December of 2001 because one of the issues that it happens to be in is the September 1981 issue of Heavy Metal.
Mhm.
The September 1981 issue of Heavy Metal, the cover was drawn or painted by Chris Achios. And in December of 2021, Chris passed away. And it's made even more collectible because that cover happens to be the artwork that they used on the poster for Heavy Metal with Tiara. So it's a classic cover by an artist that's no longer living in a limited edition magazine anyway, and it's got Jim Steranko art inside it. So
Wow.
now that magazine went from like $80 to about $300, which makes it even harder for everybody to get the full set. But because of, again, of scanners, you can go online and you can read the whole thing if you know where to look. This also happened with John Byrne, famously a Fantastic Four and X-Men. His artwork's renowned throughout comics. Marvel Comics had a magazine in the early 80s called Epic Illustrated that was an associate of their Epic Comics line, which was a early creator-owned series. And in the later issues of that, he started penning this beautiful philosophical poem that was the last story of Galactus. And Galactus is this world-eating monster that floats through the galaxy if you're not a fan of Fantastic Four, and he
Mhm.
consumes worlds. And the Silver Surfer is his herald, but this is at the end of our universe. And Nova is now his herald, and he comes to the end of the universe, and it's the philosophical journey of he has completed his life's goal. This eternal being has completed his life's goal, and then it's what happens, and it's the beautiful majesty of creation and destruction. That for every time destruction happens, creation has to happen, and you see that what was viewed as a mortal whose lifespan might only be a century as this terrible being of destruction, there's actually a beautiful symmetry to his existence and what his existence means. And it's touching. It was never finished, and you can only find it in the pages of this magazine that are now 40 plus years old. And without the scanners, without people throwing them online, that'd be lost to time.
It's wild. It's wild. Like, I mean, obviously, pirating stuff is not good, but without something like that, essentially pirating, that, like you said, it would be gone. The story would not exist for people to read, and arguably one of the best out there. Um, what do you think is? I mean, as someone who consumes a lot of older media, who it seems like you focus on that uh, quite a bit more than a lot of the modern day stuff. What do you think is the biggest? I mean, you dabble in everything, but what do you think is the biggest difference between some of these older publications and media versus now?
Well, most of that just stems from there's so much that I read now that doesn't surprise me. Um, I read a lot. I read a lot more than I watch television, or I listen to a lot of old radio and I read a lot of books. And there's so much stuff out now that it's not that it's not written well. It's just written for a different audience than me. Because I'm a reader. It seems like most books aren't written for book readers anymore, and that seems counterintuitive,
Interesting.
but I don't get as much engagement off of a lot of newer stuff than I do the older stuff. I find it more captivating. I mean, if you look at now, there are exceptions to that, like Joe Abercrombie, who did the first Law trilogy. Man, I churned through that extraordinarily fast. They were easier reads than I thought they would be. I thought they'd be a little bit more. I was expecting Gene Wolfe, and I didn't get Gene Wolfe. I got
Yeah.
more of a little bit more of a lighter George R. R. Martin. But man, they were good, and I wasn't really sure where he was going at all times. He wasn't too heavily influenced by tropisms, and it was a fun read. But what I find is often I get tropism. I can tell where things are going because I read so much. It's you get natural flow and natural assumption, and you can see plot contrivances, and it's not saying like, oh, I'm so smart. It's just when you read enough, when you consume enough, you see those things.
Mhm.
And a lot of authors don't take care to really try to hide or shroud those things or even try to obfuscate what they're doing. And I that's true of old stuff too, but it's not as much. Mainly because it's the old. Let's say you come up with an idea and it's a great idea, and you're like, oh, I need a unique name for my book, right? And you come up with this great idea, but then you go online and you find out there's like 7 books that already have that same title. Or you come up with a great idea and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna like type my summary in, and you find out there's 4 or 5 books that already have that as their basic plot. It gets harder and harder and harder the longer you go to be original. So
Yeah.
if you go back to the 30s when pulp writers are getting paid by the word, you're going to get people like Lee Brackett that are they're just creating fantastical worlds, and it's all brand new. There
Mhm.
are no rules because there's nobody that's done this before them. You get Asimov with the Foundation trilogy. You get all of Bradbury's stuff. You get not even sci-fi. You get guys like, John Russell Fearn and his westerns telling stories. You get Louis L'Amour telling his western stories, themes that nobody else had done before, but now are old hat that everybody's done because they laid the groundwork back then. And so I think there's less space to be original, and there's more space where it just seems like everything is rote. And so if I go back to the older stuff, you can be amazed with what you find. One thing man, in the last 6 months, I've been reading A Voyage to Arcturus, which is, I think, almost 100 years old now. And it was a sci-fi book that Tolkien liked. And I didn't even know, I had no idea this thing until recently. And I started reading it, and it's out there, man. And you're like, this is like something that should have been written in the 60s, but it's older than sin. And it's always surprising what you turn over underneath the stone when you lift one up.
What is that called again?
A Voyage to Arcturus
I'm just taking a note of that.
by David Lindsay.
David Lindsay. That name sounds familiar anyway. Um oh, there it is. Arcturus. Okay. Um do you think too that a lot of these like modern books and media is being written with television in mind anyway? Where like before you would write something and there was no such thing as TV, or TV was not a thing that like necessarily just translated a book to that. It was you wrote because people consume stories through the written word, and now there's it's almost a different way of writing where people are sort of keeping in mind like, oh, this might be a movie, so I have to write it a certain way so it can easily translate through scenes or whatever it is. um that to me seems like a big reason we almost see these sort of shallow storytelling, beyond the fact that so many stories have already been told. Like it's
Well, there's
originals.
definitely, I mean, there's more people than ever that went out and took their community college's course on how to write a Hollywood script and think that their next greatest idea is going to be the next epic thing. And well, when their script doesn't work, oh, I'm going to do a book, or I'll just do it, and then everyone will realize my brilliance, and it's going to get picked up, and I'm going to be a millionaire, and everybody's going to know my name. There's definitely a lot of that goes on, and
Mhm.
that's readily transparent when you read almost any of that stuff. There's also a lot of like I mentioned, the Wachowski syndrome, where you'll get somebody that spends a lot of time on one thing and it's good, and they get some acclaim and some people build it up like, wow, this is really good. And then they just start shitting out things. And it's nothing has the resonance because they think it's all their talent, not the time that they poured into it. Right? Because again, accountability for whatever reason is gone. We don't seem to have a whole lot of that anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's instant gratification. It's the striving for recognition more than I would say going to television or getting anything else. It's everybody wants to be recognized, which again I think harkens back to the extreme sense of loneliness that I see, at least I perceive, that's out there. I also do find it funny that like when I'm talking about old pulp era stuff, the shadow started on the radio and then moved to the written word.
Mhm.
Um, and then became a big, huge hit and then moved to the movies. But radio was the predominant format at the time. More people listened to radio than read pulps. And then, boom, the pulps exploded. And then more people started watching movies. So now we're going to make movies.
Right.
I think things move in accordance with the direction of where entertainment is. So while right now there does seem to be a semblance of things going from the written word being mined as sources going up,
Mhm.
I think eventually what you're going to see is that's going to turn and you're going to see it go the other way. I think you're going to start having cultural things that come into streaming services or come into film and then work their way down into adaptations that breed a life of their own. Alien's a good example of what that's done. The Alien franchise, it started as arguably it started as a comic book, but I'm not going to get into that just based off of what Dan O'Bannon was inspired by with Star Beast, his original script. But you go from Dan O'Bannon with Ridley Scott's Alien to James Cameron with Aliens to Dark Horse Comics Aliens to now they had the Aliens and the Predator crossover and then Aliens and Batman. Tons of great stories throughout all those comics, and that kind of worked the other way. And then you've got audio dramas that are now being done on that. Plus, you've got video games, and really, I guess let me correct myself on that because I think video games are probably going to be the big one.
Yep.
Anyway, we've already talked about Last of Us. We talked about Fallout.
Mhm.
That seems to be where a lot of the creative energies are being poured into is these cinematic, beautiful storytelling games that are arguably bigger than a lot of movies in both what their final take is and the number of people that watch them and play them.
Yeah. It it's funny too. Yeah, I was going to mention video games because there's a lot of great narrative storytelling in games nowadays. Some suck, but there's been some in the past that have done really well. Some, reused tropisms and whatnot, but the but done really well. And now I think we are seeing somewhat of a turn in that, like, it's not mainstream, but I've certainly noticed, obviously, people, especially in the indie scene, taking up comics. I've started seeing more people crowdfunding books or trying to crowdfund books and write, do some independent stuff and break away from, big publishers. And that to me I mean, that is like one of the best things possible. Like, again, we live in an age where self-publishing is totally uh and crowdfunding is totally acceptable and very, very viable to get your product out there as long as you have a good product. So I hope that stuff's I hope it catches on, not just in the fringe communities of comics and in independent writing, but or independent publishing rather. I hope people start seeing this as like, this is a brand new way that we can tell stories, and even American, like you're starting to see manga become really popular in America. um so I mean, it's not like an American thing, but you're starting to see people consume it here, as this is where they want their stories is told in 500 issues of of a story, so I
Well, and I
mean.
think they're hitting something that we really haven't even talked about, and that's price point for your dollar.
Yeah.
Like when I talked about Mac Smith's Scurry, 336 pages for $15. Well, man, I know manga books that are like you can get 300 pages for 10.
Right.
You can't beat the price point, and with where we currently are in the economic factor, man, your dollar is very precious. So spend it and get the maximum amount of entertainment you possibly can out of it.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, that's not going to your local theater and shoveling out 23 bucks for a ticket and then mortgaging your home for popcorn and drinks for the family. I mean, that can get ridiculous as a family of 4. And Man, what's better? You can just run and get the latest copy of Dogman for 9.99, and your kid will be happy for weeks. You know what I mean?
He
It's
loves Dogman. My kid
every
loves
kids do,
Dogman.
man, and it's the
Captain
simplest
Underpants.
thing. But and
Yeah.
oh, I can't tell you how many times. Look at this joke. Oh man, it's so great.
Yep. Well, and that's what I like too. I do like seeing, you know, the focus on kids and getting them into, reading panels. I mean, it helps them read anyway, but they get, it's essentially a picture book. So they can, even if they can't read, they can kind of like thumb through and see what's going on. Like, oh, he did this and then he did this. And then they start reading. But yeah, my kid loves Dogman. He loves Captain Underpants, all those silly things. And they're fun. And I think it's where a lot of we look at stuff like that and we realize, oh, that's fun and it's cool. And then everything that comes out for adults, it's like no one can have fun with it. And I even said this about Fallout. I'm like, can we not like enjoy the good aspects of this show? Is everything about some communist agenda? Is everything about some wokeism? Is everything, like it is this really where we're at with entertainment? Or can we just not have fun with something and like this is what this product did right. I talked with my friend about this. Like even if a show is bad and has things in it that you think is a slippery slope in the cultural zeitgeist, what what does that thing do right though? Like, isn't that another part of the discussion? Like, sure, this was bad, but it also did these things right. It did cinematography right. It did tell storytelling well in this aspect. It failed in this aspect. Like nuance in the discussion, I think is important. When all you do is pour your heart and soul into how shitty something is, well, that's all your audience is going to see. But if someone sees, oh, this guy is actually being able to rip apart this section, but also praise it in other ways because it was brilliantly done. Like that's something I think is just lost on a lot of people who, and not just YouTubers, but even regular people.
No, and I think going back to my show, the Friday show on the gutter,
Yeah.
that's one of the things we really try to focus on is even if we recently did the Ghost Machines, a big release from Image. They dropped a ton of books, and they had a preview issue that was released a while back, and it kind of did like 3 to 4 page sample stories of introductions of all these books that they're going to be dropping, and we did a review on it, and some were not good, and some we really tried to praise because like, man, even though this I don't like this, I like what they're trying to do here. Distillery is another up and coming recently created comic book company, and they did a book called The Devil's Cut, and it was, I think, 10 or 11 individual stories that were just previews of books that they're going to be releasing throughout the year. Of those, I think my co-host and I really liked 4 out of them, but the 4
Mhm.
that we liked are so good. It's just, man, like these are just ridiculously good in their concepting and their creation and their form and the art and the story. Everything about it hits, and these are great. Here's another one. The story works, but I didn't like the art, and here's why. I think that's vital, and I think more people need to be doing that when whether it's a book, whether it's a film, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a comic, in any entertainment,
Mhm.
you need to be honest and compliment because without complimenting, you're not giving anybody a guide, a map for where you're headed. You need to have a goal for what you're talking about, and you need to have that goal clearly defined with things that are good and then things that need work. And if they can make that association, they're not only going to buy into you because if you like something and they like something, they're more apt to listen to you. But you need to explain that because it can't just be we bond together on this because if it's just that that's the neither there's no substance there. You need to have substance behind it, otherwise it lacks any intrinsic value and it's just empty words, and there's enough empty words online. We certainly don't need to be adding to them.
No. Yeah. And I think the other thing I would like to see from a resurgence in media is like short storytelling, short stories. Just little like I mean 50 pages. Like that's it. Even less than that. It would be cool to see something like it would almost be a challenge to see, are you able to tell a story in this amount of time? Like you don't like, do you understand the structure of storytelling? Go for it. You know, like I feel like even when we were kid, well, I'm a little younger than you, but when I was a kid, like we used to see like anthologies and books that had all those things, but you just don't anymore. And it's kind of a bummer because I mean I've written a bunch of small little stories or vignettes that I would love to publish for people, and I've actually thought about maybe even trying to crowdfund it. Because I mean there's probably like 25 or so that are just kind of sitting there, that I'm proud of. You know, that it's been a while since I've kind of looked them over, so I was gonna maybe hire an editor to go through them, but because I want to see those, I want to see those come back or start to be published. So what, you know, I guess I should start with myself. It's like, I
Right.
want to see it, I'll put it out there.
Well,
Um,
nothing ever truly dies. I mean, you'll see a lot of stuff online like, "Oh, how can we stop the comic book industry from dying?" Comic books are always gonna be here. They're just gonna
yeah.
be around in a different form
Mhm.
than what you readily accept them as right now.
Yeah.
They exist in an entirely different form now than they did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I went to the grocery store with my mom, and
Yeah.
I bolted for the magazine rack, and I would read Punisher and X-Men and all that while just sitting on the floor right in front of the magazine rack because they were in the grocery store. They're
Yep.
not in grocery stores anymore. Now you got to go to the LCS. Things
Yep.
change, but comic books will always be here. It's just where you access them is going to be different.
Yeah.
That being said, what you're talking about, short stories, I mean, you can do anthologies, you can do published anthologies. Those were real big in the 80s. They were real big in the 60s with the dime store paperbacks. The flip books, if you ever see the old Del Rey flips,
Yeah.
you get two stories for one. You just got to flip the book over and read the
Dude,
other way.
that's actually what I was thinking about when I was saying that. Yeah.
But before that, that's where the pulps were, and the pulps were 100-page tomes written on cheap paper that had great numbers of short stories in them. I mean, guys that got their start, all of Lovecraft stuff. I mean, anybody out there that reads H.P. Lovecraft, it was all weird tales. Robert E. Howard, Conan, started in the pulps. Ray Bradbury started in the pulps. Tarzan started in the pulps. All these things that are modern cornerstones of our fiction worlds were established then in the pulps, and they still exist today. You've got guys like Kursova that produces a quarterly magazine that is filled with short stories. It's I think it runs anywhere from like $8 to $15, depending on if you're buying a new issue or an old issue.
Mm.
And man, I think it's every July, August, he opens up and he says, just submit me your stories. And the poor bastard sits there and reads through them all and selects a bunch of them, pays the guys that he selected, contracts the art, gets the magazine put together, and boom, you're off to the races. And he's got 4 more issues coming out. And more of stuff like that needs to be done because there are some absolutely fantastic stories being printed by authors that are starting to be recognized and getting some notoriety in that vein, and then they're able to go out and crowdfund their own books or actually get a publishing deal.
Yeah.
And if that's the avenue they want to go down, because man, here's this little dirty little secret about publishing: they want to make money. So if you've got a product and you can show that you've already got a built-in audience, you're halfway there.
Right. Yeah. It there's hope. I mean, there's so much hope, but like I think if people are going to take anything from this discussion that we've had, it's that like there's work to be done. You know, there's always work to be done, and that's the point. Doesn't matter if it's your kids, doesn't matter if it's your career, if it's your savings account, um, your family, job, all this stuff. Um, it's all work, and I think that's what like is supposed to bring you. I don't want to say happiness, but it's this is why you're here. Figure out why you're on this earth. What drives you to do something the next day? What are you passionate about? Because it makes life a little bit easier doing the things and investing in the things that you want to see accomplished. You know, if that's raising a good family and outbreeding the leftists, if it's making a banger comic that tells a brilliant story, it all takes work. And I think that's like the leading message that we've pretty much hit on at almost every single thing that we've talked about. Um, I don't know. It's it's something that I think everyone knows, but it's one of the truths that people have a hard time really accepting, that that's why they haven't been where they want to be, is because they refuse to be hard on themselves. And by hard on themselves, I mean like let themselves get beat down to get back up to make something truly great of themselves.
Right. Well, I mean, we only touched the surface. I mean, over on YouTube, we were just talking primarily about the written word and some illustrated stuff with comics. But if you look at what's being done with short story film telling, just on YouTube, you mentioned earlier, like being able to film on your phone,
Hmm.
what guys are doing in their home, and really where this resonated the most for me, and we've talked about this before, was the last episode. I think it was season 2 of The Mandalorian, and
Hmm.
you have the reveal of Luke Skywalker, and it's Disney, this multi-billion-dollar studio. They drop the episode. Everybody goes, "Oh my God, it's Luke." The next day, I get messaged a YouTube video, a YouTube link to a YouTube video, and it's a dude that's in his basement with just his GFX rig that he's got at home, and he did a better de-aging of Luke than what Disney did.
Oh my God. Really?
That's where the level of ability and talent is out there. And
Hmm.
if you go to like channels like Dust on YouTube, there are some fantastic sci-fi films. Black Milk Studio just started dropping their A Thousand Suns, which are like 5 to 10 minute shorts that are like Outer Limitsy kind of stuff. That's some great stuff. Solstice 5 is out there on YouTube. That's a great little short movie. Oats Studios, which is by the guy that did District 9.
Yeah.
Oh my god, man, he's got some absolutely killer short form stuff. Now,
Yep.
granted, that's, quote unquote Hollywood. He's got money, but it gives you an idea of what's going on out there. And this is all free. You can go and watch like Dust. You could spend a week on Dust and not even scratch the surface of everything that they've offered
I
on
think I'm
that channel.
subscribed to them. I think.
They've got some excellent, excellent stuff on
Yeah.
there. A lot of it's just not for me, but man, every once in a while you catch one and it's just absolutely fantastic. And don't be like, look around. There's a lot of great VFX guys that have gotten together with some good writers, and they've put together some excellent short form stories on YouTube. There's also some great writers that are using YouTube to, promote themselves with their writing, and they're doing audio plays.
Yeah.
And there's some, if you're into audiobooks, man, check out some of that stuff because there's a lot of great indie stuff there. You can't go wrong. Everything's at your fingertips, man. The hardest part, like I said, is sifting through and finding those gems right now. And man, if you got to work a little bit to find something that's worth your time, I'd say that's time well spent personally. But
There was another series I always tell people about, and I don't. No one's making fucking videos on this. It's older now, but I don't. I've never really seen anyone talk or break down some of the greatest short sci-fi vignettes I've ever watched on Love, Death, and the Robots on Netflix. That
yeah,
series is phenomenal, phenomenal. And like there's always some, different kind of artwork, animation, whatever it is, hand drawn. Like there's so much cool stuff on there, great stories, some better than others, as as it goes. But it's just another thing, like they're out there. And I think Love, Death, Robots came out at a weird time where they had really fallen off and like they're jacking up their subscription, so it may have just gone under the radar that way. But again, it's like people are always talking about a shortage of good content. I'm like, there is no shortage of it. It's just you're only paying attention to what people are saying is bad. Go look at the things that are really good. And you might just have to look for it for a little bit. And you'd be pleasantly surprised. Netflix isn't, I mean, as a company, sure, maybe they're evil, but there's good content that's on there that'll keep you busy for a really long time. Uh,
well, that's one of the things that always kind of makes me grind my teeth, man, is anytime somebody says, "Oh, the company is inherently evil." A company is an entity, man. Like it
yeah,
can't be good or evil, by its very
it's true.
nature. So, but you want to put in faceless, associations because it's easier to do blanket statements. And it's no fault for you because it's out there. It's in the zeitgeist. Everybody just says it. Um, but no, there is, for what, like we've talked about, there is this sense that it is a lot easier to tear something down than it is to build it up, and it's really hard. It's hard for me to convince another person to watch something it's rather easy to convince somebody to not to watch something that they never were going to watch in the first place.
Yeah.
And one gives me a massive sense of accomplishment, and the other is a lot of work. And, you know, you can, based off of where I've been headed this entire time, I think you can know what my assumption is for the responsibility and accountability factor on that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it comes down to, is just what gives the dopamine hit, what's the bigger one, what makes you feel better, what gives you the more channel likes, what do people tend to respond to, and I guess that's something we all need to work on.
Yeah.
You respond better, look for positivity. The best thing you can do, and I think Razorfist said this years ago, but I can't remember if I've been quoting him or not, but I loved it when I heard it. If it was him, great. If not, I'll take credit for it. But the best thing you can do for something that you hate is just apathy, man. Let it die in apathy. Don't talk about it. Let it just, if you talk about it, you're giving it life. You're giving it notoriety. Somebody's going to go check it out. If you hate it, just don't talk about it.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think, like you just said it right before that, is that it's something that we have to all practice, because in some ways we've been conditioned to, oh, no, 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 talk it, trash it, because people want to hear that. They want to rally behind negativity, and it's making people a lot of money. You could do it, but you're 100% right. It's why a lot of times, people will say ignore the haters. It's because it's the same thing, because all they live off of your reaction to what they're saying, right? It's the same exact thing. They're just like, oh, I'm getting a reaction out of this guy, so I'm going to keep doing that, because it's like a rating on a television show. The company sees that you're watching it. So whether you hate watching it or watching it because you love it, it's the same thing to them. It's the same advertising dollar, whatever. So you're 100% right, man. But it's a hard practice. Cause even there's part of me that looks at a new Star Wars show and wants to believe that there's something good about it. Whatever it might be, that's like on the tipping point. I'm like, oh, this could be it. This could be the one. And I'm disappointed every single time. I think, oh, maybe this is the one. Maybe the next episode. Maybe the next episode. And you're much wiser than me. And in the past, you've said, I've watched one episode. I'm not doing another one because this just is awful, and I'm not going to give it the time of day, even to the point of not even talking about it, which again is even giving the words. It's like, I'm not going to engage in this conversation. You engage in it, because I don't believe that breathing life into it is doing anything good. So,
Yeah, it's just not going to change anything. So why bother?
yeah,
I'd much rather talk about stuff that I love. I mean, you talked about, like, you love 12 Angry Men. Absolutely, man. I would rather spend 3 hours talking about a movie that's 50 plus years old rather than a Star Wars show that just dropped 6 months ago that is terrible.
yeah,
Because one has massive cultural relevance, and one has things that everybody can go and watch it and take away from it. And the other one's just candy. It's just sugar entertainment that has
mhm.
no nutritional value for the mind. So
It's a this is again, this is why I think in some respects I'm always disappointed that our show never like fully panned out. But I think that, again, reconnecting and being able to talk tonight, just is a good way to check in, because you and I have similar likes and dislikes, I think, but our in-depth conversations could really go somewhere. And I always loved our conversations about, media in the past. But no, this has been good, and very honestly, it's been very. I've learned quite a bit, and I've got a couple of great books that I need to obviously buy. And actually, I just saw Scurry is actually available at my local Barnes and Noble, so I might grab that on the way to go camping.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I highly recommend it, man. It's a good one.
it looks
Might
like
be a little bit much for the younger one, but your older will probably dig it.
okay, yeah, I'll definitely. I was looking at. I was going to ask if it was maybe good for the 6, 7 year old. Um, but yeah, no, I've been trying to introduce him to more and more comics, like some of the ones that I have. Like I got one of the Geeks and Gamers guys, Jay Drunk 3PO, put out Achromatic Blue, which is very very adolescent, like kid focused, and him and I read that one. He loved it. and they're coming out with achromatic green. So we're kind of watching those, trying to again try and be involved with the kids and build memories on all that stuff because I want him to remember that we were thumbing through comics at one point and learning how these stories unfold
Hell
because
yeah.
you only get one chance, man, and then before you
Absolutely.
know it, it's done. They're yelling at you and hanging out with their friends and then moving out. I don't. How old are your kids? Will you say or you keep them?
Mine are both preteen,
Oh, okay. So
so I've still got a little bit of time.
gotta hold on tight. Gotta hold on tight. Um,
Exactly.
Well, what do you got coming up, dude? Like, so you told us a little bit about the gutter. Like, what do you have some episodes planned? What's coming up for you on your YouTube channel and stuff?
Yeah, so this Friday, Mad Cave Studios, it will be releasing their iteration of their latest iteration. They've currently got the license for their new Dick Tracy book. Dick Tracy, famously the comic strip character that was created by Chester Gould. He's been rebooted numerous times. There's a whole lore of history behind where the movie rights are right now. Famously, Warren Beatty actually came out at the end of 2023 and did a 10-minute or about a 10-15 minute interview just so he could maintain the rights because he's
I saw that.
in a long-standing disagreement with another organization and he has to continually do it. But this is it's a comic book, and it looks to be Dick Tracy, in my opinion, is something that you can't do. You can't bring that forward. It's of era. It'll never be able to be adapt to a modern time. It is what it is, and by the very nature of what it is, it can't adapt. But we're going to look over this newest adaptation, and with a friend of mine, with Hojo. So JP, my co-host, and I will be going through that and giving our thoughts. On May 3rd, I spoke briefly about him. The gentleman that's behind Kursova Magazine will be
Mhm.
our special guest. On May 10th, we've got John's Longbox, who has an excellent comic book show over on his channel, John's Longbox. And then on May 17th, I've got another independent creator who goes by the handle Nandor. And he currently has a book that's up for crowdfunding called The Fable Offering that is fully funded and ready to go. So I think he's on his first 30 on that one. And then looking around, probably June 7th or so, we'll be kicking into Chris Claremont's Dark Phoenix run on Uncanny X-Men and going through kind of the history, the story on that. And that'll probably be a 3 or 4 part series that will kind of premiere throughout the summer. So interspersed throughout that, we'll have old magazines, old comics, old books, old shows that JP and I will be talking about, and just celebrating all the stuff out there that we feel is worthy of your time.
Cool, man. I really appreciate your time tonight. I think it was a really great discussion and kind of something a little different that I don't always like get into with people. And I think you provided like a really great look into a little different than what we're used to seeing, and even hearing about. I think there's a lot of negativity in the YouTube sphere, at least the one that I float in a lot of times, and I want people to hear something a little bit different. And you gave a couple of good book recommendations, Scurry, and then the other one was Seven to Eternity, which I'm gonna for sure check both of these out. And then we'll have to sit down and talk about them, dude. Like
Hell
I
yeah,
want to
man.
start talking about things I really like. Would love to be back on the gutter with you sometime and talk about movies. Um, and then yeah, but yeah, dude. Thank you. I appreciate you very much. I hope you understand how much I respect you and the stuff that you do, the work that you do, because it's very important in preserving all these old works, and then I think moving into a better, more positive space in commentary.
Yeah, and I didn't even get a chance. I really appreciate coming on. It's always a great time, Shags. And I didn't even get a chance to talk about my own channel. I actually just recently broke 1,000 subs, so that was pretty fantastic.
Yes, nice.
But I've stopped. I haven't done anything over on my main channel. So I think I dropped 1 or 2. But mainly, what I do on my main channel is it's primarily about I take old shadow radio shows from the 30s and the 40s. I spend an inordinate and massive amount of time cleaning the audio up. I do a deep dive into the history on it. I provide, usually about a 60-second intro that kind of talks a little bit about the episode. I put the full refurbished, remastered episode, and then sometimes at the end I'll give some trailing thoughts on what you just listened to. But I'll be getting back into that again this summer. I just got kind of burned out after doing a couple hundred episodes, and they are quite time consuming to clean up some of that old radio audio. But I'll be doing more of that on my main channel. So if you're into old radio at all, be doing a lot more over there. But yeah, man, I think that's this is all my take on it. And I saw, Krusty Krab did the famous quote of, pretty sure there's a quote about evil thriving when good men do nothing. Well, I don't believe media can be evil. Media is media. Men are good or evil. And motivations can be what motivations are. But that nothing was ever, again, man, if you don't talk about something, you can just say it's bad. You don't have to spend 5 hours ranting about why. All
Right.
you have to do is go, I just didn't dig it. And but you know what I did do? I did watch this and I love this. And all that does is it changes the tact and you're focusing on a positive. And yeah, that doesn't resonate as much. But in a world surrounded by negativity, I'd much rather be the guy talking about the stuff that I love rather than being just another voice in the cacophony of hate that's out there
Yes.
on one show after another. And that's not my style. It doesn't mean that the people that are doing that are wrong. It's just not me.
Hell yeah, man. I 100% agree. I look forward to our future conversations. This is one of many more to come. We've done a few in the past. You can actually probably check those out if you guys look at the Midnight Oil playlist. Him and I used to do a show called the Midnight Oil where we would talk late at night about movies and entertainment that we were liking or just wanted to discuss. But yeah, check that out. That's going to do it for me. This next week, I'm going to be gone from Tuesday to Sunday. I'm going to be out of here. So I'm taking a big step away for family vacation because family is important. And then when I come back next week, we have some great interviews and just my normal stuff. I might be playing some games next week. I haven't really decided yet. I think gaming might be done for me. I think I'm too old now. But either way, it's been a pleasure seeing you all in chat. Sonia, Krabby Patty, Jonas K, Emperor Doomsday, and Devastator and Nefarious. Thank you guys so much for stopping by tonight. And everyone who watched or listened after the fact. See you guys next time. Have a great night.